How's
Hello.
everybody doing this morning?
Morning.
Good.
Really
Very good.
well.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for joining here this morning. Really, I think a very relevant conversation around sustainability this morning with some fantastic leaders across our industry. We'll start with some introductions. I'm Rob Tomlinson, and I lead the Enterprise Partnerships team at Everfi. Everfi is an organization that partners with a lot of the companies that you've seen here at Brand Innovators this week around accomplishing their CSR and social impact goals. We do that through providing an ed tech platform that's used in 30,000 schools across the country and enables teachers to lead courses around topics that are typically missing from your standard education curriculum. And we private label those courses with some of the brands that are here today to teach topics like financial education, mental health, character building, and of course, sustainability. And so that's a big part of ultimately who we are. Thrilled to have each of you here. And Ty, if you wouldn't mind leading off introductions for the rest of the team.
Sure, yeah. Hey folks, I'm Ty Montague. I'm the Chairman and Chief Purpose Officer of Co-Collective. I also head up our Sustainability and Circularity Strategy offer at Co. We are a New York-based purpose-led business transformation consultancy. We really help leadership teams define and align on what their higher purpose is as a business, and then we try to help them operationalize it with our org and culture design team internally, make it work, help people understand what it is, why it is, what to do with it inside the business. And then we also help them instantiate it externally through experience design. So how do you put it out into the world and make it real for your customers and other stakeholders?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Padula, and I'm the VP of Marketing at Nespresso US. I also have a dual hat role as of about May of this year, where I'm the head of sustainability. So well poised, I think, to talk about this topic, and excited to be here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Nelson. I head up a food tech company called SAVRPak. It leverages thermodynamics to fight food's #1 enemy, which is condensation. Excited to be here.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for being here, of course. And we're certainly going to speak to sustainability, where it fits into our purpose, where it fits into our marketing strategy, you know, where it works, maybe where it doesn't. But Scott had an excellent suggestion, which was, let's talk about how we define sustainability, what it means to each of us, what it means to the companies that we represent, and frankly, a lot of the companies that we work with as well. So Scott, I'd love if you wouldn't mind kind of starting us off there and what you've seen from a definition perspective.
Yeah, I think for us, it's if you can extend the shelf life of produce, if you can make food last longer, it does not end up in landfill, which is not good, right? So if we can actually have food consumed by us and not thrown out, that's how we're looking at sustainability. Less food waste, better for the environment. The only other thing that I would add to, which I thought was topical and interesting, is I work with Purdue University and their Dial Ventures group, and a lot of our conversations are with America's farmers. And I was with a farmer in Monticello, Indiana, somewhere a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about this thing called sustainability, and the farmer across from me said, if you were to Google sustainability, the result should be America's farmers, because actually they've been doing it for a long, long time. So I thought that was interesting and topical.
Yeah, I love it.
You want me to go next? I think it's interesting because we have this whole debate around what is sustainability, even internally. And I think for a long time, I've been with Nespresso 7 years, and when I first started, I think we only ever thought about the E part of sustainability, if you think about ESG. And it's really obvious maybe for a food company who's working with farmers in countries of origin to think about how do we better farm coffee, how do we do it more sustainably to frankly ensure that we have coffee in 50 years, and not just any coffee, but really high quality coffee that Nespresso sells. And more, I think, both through some of the topics that were in the last panel discussed, COVID, pandemic, racial reckoning, as well as just this new generation of Gen Z, they're really seeing sustainability be even more about the S, and of course the G, but they're really particularly inclined to say brands, the way I think of brands are brands that share my values, and that's much more in the social space. So for us at Nespresso, the evolution of the definition of sustainability, I think, is what's most interesting, in that you can't lose sight of the E piece, because again, we are a food brand first and foremost. So you have to be thoughtful about sourcing, where it comes from. But maybe what the kicker is, and I know there's a whole debate around ESG and the fact that it's not really tied to profitability, or it's not really an ROI driver. And actually at Nespresso, I think we think about it fundamentally differently, which is that every dollar you invest in sustainability is in service of furthering your business goals. What I mean by that is we're not doing sustainability because it's the right thing or we care, we do, but that's not why we're doing it. We're actually doing it to protect the future of coffee. And so it is a business driver. And I think it's eye-opening to say we're not in it just because we're a purpose-led company. We are, but it's actually this fuel for our business. And that's okay to admit as a business that you can be a force for good and big companies can still do good.
Yeah, agree with that completely, both of you. But we have maybe even a slightly different take on sustainability. We think of it as helping build sustainable enterprises. And so when we think about sustainability, we think about social and environmental sustainability, right? Because to be a resilient organization in the future, we really believe that you have to manage and think about multiple stakeholders in the future rather than just shareholders. And one of the key stakeholders in the future, to your point, is the planet. It is our life support system. Without it, no coffee and a lot of other things would be missing as well. And so we call our term for a sustainable enterprise is a generative company, a company that's purpose-led, that is inclusive in action and sustainable in practice. And so that's a very high bar. Almost no company perfectly meets that bar, and that's not really the point. The point isn't to be perfect. The point is to really set goals in all three of those areas and then start managing toward them over time, right? It's a process to get there.
Fantastic. No, really great stuff. And so let's talk about individually some of your organizations, how you've taken sustainability and approached it in tying it to your organization, your brand's purpose, but also integrating it into your marketing strategy, and where that's been most effective. And so, Jessica, you kind of spoke about a little bit there how obviously it's not just about who you are, it's also good for business. Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think purpose and sustainability is inextricably linked for Nespresso, and that's why I have the dual hat role that I have now, because I'm not an expert in sustainability. If you ask me about greenhouse gases, I probably will not answer your questions as well as others could, but where it makes a lot of sense is this integration, because sustainability is great and we need to save the planet. But if we don't bring everyone along with us, the entire consumer population, all the people drinking Nespresso, if you're not recycling your capsules, if you're not thoughtful about how you consume and precision consumption, then we can be doing anything we want at Nespresso. And unless we've used our platform to share that with the world, then we won't make a difference, right? So one of the really great examples, and to speak more on the social impact piece, is our employee resource groups a few years ago said, we want to do more than just sell the coffee. Of course, we need to do that, but how can our coffee kind of give back to our local communities? And we're based here in New York. And so we partnered with an organization, a nonprofit called the Ali Forney Center, which is the nation's largest homeless center for LGBTQ youth who have been kicked out of their homes for whatever reason. And we worked with an artist to interpret their mission and print it on coffee cups, so that every time you drank your coffee, you were reminded that coffee can be a force for good, that it can do more than just that. And we sold the cups, and they were wildly popular. They sold out in a matter of weeks. And that art now lives on the walls in our boutique in Soho as, again, a reminder to employees, to customers, that we do more than just sell coffee. And so there's ways, I think, that it's just innately part of who we are, that came from our employees and turned into a big program and a big activation for us, but also just continue to remind that there's more to it, and the sustainability pieces of the puzzle are critical to our marketing efforts.
That's excellent. Now, Scott, when your organization, of course, came together, it's nearly impossible to detach sustainability from your purpose. Tell us about how you really just embraced that as a part of your marketing strategy.
Yeah. Well, before SAVRPak, I was at Panera, and we were a brand built on transparency. So when you're a brand built on transparency and you start having sustainability commitments and goals, it gets really interesting, and you learn a lot from a larger organization. And then when you go to a small startup, we're very aggressive. Food waste is the center of every conversation that we have on a daily basis with every partner. If we can extend the shelf life of your raspberry one extra day, that's huge. If we can make your French fries not soggy and crispy upon 35-minute delivery window, that's good for all of us, right? So we just take every example that comes at us, no matter who the partner is or whatnot, or what's trending, or what's the cultural conversation around sustainability, waste, food insecurity. It's all over, and we just go right at it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how we operate.
I think it's a good response, whether it's a direct answer or not.
Thank you.
Ty, we talked a little bit about, ahead of this, the connection between purpose and the marketing strategy. And I think you had some interesting comments on that. I would love for you to speak to those.
Yeah, we really believe that thinking of sustainability as something that you talk about is potentially quite dangerous. Our belief is action first, then words. So you have to connect your sustainability strategy to your purpose, and your purpose needs to be about action. You need to do it. And then if you have really done it, then talk about it. Because if you're talking about it before you've done it, there's a gap between word and deed. And at Co-Collective, we have a word for that gap. We call it bullshit. And bullshit, I hasten to add, bullshit we believe is a treatable condition. You just have to get your actions and your words back in line. And we made a podcast about this. There are 24 episodes up online where we rated companies on the level of BS, really as kind of a public service. So you can check it out. It's at callingbullshitpodcast.com. There's an index of companies that the index goes from 0 to 100, 0 bullshit to 100% BS. Lowest score we got in the 24 episodes was a company called Vital Farms. They're in the egg business out of Austin, Texas. And the highest score that we got was a 98, almost perfect bullshittery. And that was from our friends at the business consultancy McKinsey, who claimed to be purpose-led. But when you dig into it, maybe not so much. But you decide. And I hasten to add again, we're not here to hate or call people out. We just want to point out that every company exists on a spectrum, and every company ought to rate themselves and then work to get your score down, right? It's like we all ought to be trying to push for 0. And one of the neat things about doing the podcast is when we interviewed the CEOs of places like Unilever and Vital Farms, we asked them to rate themselves on the BS score, and none of them gave themselves a 0, right? Russell Diaz-Canseco at Vital Farms gave himself a 10. I think we actually gave him a better score than he gave himself. Alan Jope gave himself a 20. So it's really about having the courage to be honest with yourselves about where you're at and then working in a positive direction.
Oh, that's
Ty, I'm
great.
competitive, and now I want to beat your lowest
Get
score.
in there.
I believe it. No, that's great. That's great. And it really validates quite a bit of frankly, like what we've heard in the marketplace. Everfi founded alongside Fortune this impact event that we just had our second conference several weeks ago, I guess, in Atlanta. And this is so along the lines of a lot of ESG leaders that are in that room talking about it. And the consistent takeaways are a lot with what you said, Jessica, that we're doing this because not just because we care about it, because it's good for business. The focus more on the S than just the E, of course. And then lastly, these organizations have absolutely identified that there is an opportunity to leverage this to connect with new audiences that they haven't before. I would love to hear from each of you regarding some successes, maybe some challenges, some failures potentially that your teams have seen or you've seen out in the marketplace regarding leveraging sustainability as a part of your clear marketing practices. So Jessica, would you care to share there?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think it's really relevant because one of the stats that's guiding us right now is that I think it's 1 in 5 Gen Z audiences would switch brands if the brand didn't align or their actions didn't align with their values. And I think you can say, okay, well then we have to align our values with Gen Z. That's not the right approach. For us, it's then going back to what are the values internally at Nespresso? And we were founded on innovation and sustainability, full stop. And so how do you kind of constantly go back to that? But I'll be the first to admit that recycling is sort of par for the course when you think about a single serve product. That's a category barrier to entry. We know that if we are not recyclable, then many people won't even enter the category. But we also know that's not a driver of consideration. So that's a challenge when you then think about your marketing efforts and you say, I can't lead with a recycling story, but somewhere in your consumer experience of Nespresso, you need to know that that's a critical part of your coffee and your Nespresso ritual. And so we've done a lot of work. We actually worked with New York City to make curbside recycling of our capsules possible. That was a over $1 million investment with DSNY in the recycling facilities here in New York to make it possible that for those of you who live in the city, you can put your Nespresso capsule right in your blue bin and it will be recovered. And that was not possible. It's too small of a piece of aluminum to be recycled normally. So it needed this special equipment. That's a win because then you think about the actions actually are the first thing. We want to make it more easy and convenient because we want people to recycle. And it's our responsibility to make it easy for people. But I'll be honest, there's people all across the country who it still doesn't feel easy to them. And we're having a hard time changing behavior. The average recycling rate.
It's really, really hard.
It's really hard to change behavior. And especially when you think about the national recycling rate for aluminum, it's probably hovering in the low 30s. We're probably beating that a little bit. So we've gotten all the people who are going to recycle anyways because they feel like they should. But how do we want to be double that, right? And how do you do that? And again, like I said, we're investing so much as a brand in driving awareness and consideration, but we know that recycling is not the unlock for that. So I'm not saying I have the solution, but that's the types of conversations that we're having when you think about investment realities and meeting the consumer with the message they need at the right time.
So 40% of the world's food produced is thrown out. If food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd largest, and then the average household throws out $2,000 a year in food. That's a problem, right? So getting back to your question, a challenge that we've had specifically at our tech company is how much are you willing to invest in your sustainability goals? I hear a lot of talk. I hear a lot of brands claiming that they have commitments and goals and whatnot. But then when it comes to perhaps investing in new innovation that might cost you 2 to 3 cents per unit to then extend the shelf life of your raspberries anywhere from 1 to 3 days, which means less food waste, that's a good thing that helps you check off your sustainability goals. So I think the challenge that we have, and again, we're a younger company, right? So is getting some of these partners and clients of ours to actually invest behind their sustainability goals.
Ty, I know you've learned a little bit about who, in fact, is willing to pay for it. When we talk about sustainability and more sustainable products at a consumer level, what has your organization learned about generationally and who folks are targeting and what industries? Who's willing to pay more for sustainable products?
Yeah, I mean, this is not from me. This is honestly from Alan Jobe, who's the former CEO of Unilever, and it came from one of our podcast interviews. But he said that they had gone deep on exactly that question. It's like everybody says that they're for sustainability because who wouldn't be for it, right? It's like education. Yeah, but execution, like when it comes to paying more for it and making it actually happen, you see drop off. And Alan said in their study, boomers don't care. Gen Xers care, but won't pay. Millennials care, but won't pay more unless the product is demonstrably superior in ways beyond sustainability. Gen Z will pay. They really care, and they want to do business with companies that are really paying attention to the future of the planet. Not a giant surprise, since they're going to live in it the longest. They inherit all the problems that we have, generationally created. And so, I mean, it's a sort of a, I guess the irony there is they're the least probably, they have less money so far, but that's also changing quickly.
So far.
Yeah, also changing quickly. So
millennials aren't like the children that we were all so used to talking about any longer, right? So it changes fastly. Very good. So yeah, and I think like I'll just add, another thing that we've certainly learned, I think is that lots of organizations have maybe had the BS detectors that have come up about the things that they say. Nobody gets criticized for what they do, though, right? For the actions they actually take as it pertains to driving sustainability. That is generally applauded quite well. It's when you're just speaking about it, but without the real substance behind it, I think that you might end up with a higher BS score than others. So we've got a few minutes left here. Would love to open it to some questions if there are any from the audience here before we wrap this up. So any questions? We've got one here. Gonna make the microphone team run wide.
Hi, I'm Brian Chapp with Tech Recipes. I was just wondering, for anybody on the stage, what have you tried that you thought was going to work but didn't, and what did you learn from it?
So many things. Well, I touched on recycling earlier, but maybe there's a lot in there that we've tried, and it hasn't demonstrably moved the needle, so I can break a lot of that down. But I'll give you a different example, which is we work through our AAA Sustainable Quality Program, which we're celebrating 20 years of, to the point around action. We launched a program called Reviving Origins, where we go to countries of origin that are losing the coffee trade for some reason or another. It could be war, it could be climate reasons, and we go in and we help fix with NGOs whatever the issues are. I'll give Puerto Rico as an example because it's close to home. When it was ravaged by hurricanes, it produces amazing coffee. The country produces amazing coffee, and we said, we didn't just send money to Puerto Rico. We actually go there, and they needed seedlings. They needed actual little trees to accelerate the growth of the trees. Long story short, the program is amazing. We've tried to tell that story with National Geographic. We've tried to tell it with George Clooney, and it hasn't fully landed. And it's an amazing story when you think about trying to save amazing coffee, great quality, and the action that Nespresso is taking. And I wouldn't say it's our top performing coffee when maybe it should be. So we've learned that try to make it as meaningful, close to home as possible. And that's the story that I mentioned about the cups before.
Hey, I have a question. We got time for one more?
I think we do.
All right, David with Brand Innovators. You heard from me before. So I have a question. Maybe this is for Ty, but for everybody a little bit. Hey, Scott. So millennial dad. I've got a 12-year-old daughter. We're all very environmentally conscious, sustainability focused. My daughter, she's 12. She'll outwardly say sustainability is important to her, right? Like that is actually unsolicited, right? It's important to her. It's important to her friends. They talk about environmentalism. Yet her favorite place to shop is Shein, right? And knowing that these kinds of companies and other similar companies, right? So is there a way to make sense of that? Because I haven't been able to, as a father or as a, someone in this industry, where she and her friends will say outwardly, this is important to us, yet their actions and behaviors speak otherwise. So I'm curious if you see that or if it's more of a unique situation.
No, that's a great question, and I'll just be very honest. I don't know what the answer to that is. I think about it a lot, though, because it touches on, I think, the deepest problem of our time. It's a cultural issue, right? We have spent hundreds of billions of dollars over time educating people that the things that matter are how much does it cost, how cute is it, right? What do my friends think of it? Am I keeping up? And we've spent no time educating people about the rest of the, impacts that the behavior that we're encouraging there actually has on their future and everyone else's future. And figuring out how to fund the countervailing education is like, that needs to happen. Anybody have any ideas? Give me a call. I don't know.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for your time, of course, and I appreciate the participation from everyone. So,
Thank
excellent.
you.